Hello everyone, and welcome to this Syncfusion webinar, Creating Complete Server-Side and WebAssembly Blazor Applications using Syncfusion Controls. My name is Carter Harris. I am the Video Marketing Specialist here at Syncfusion, and I will serve as your moderator today. Our presenter will be Michael Washington, founder of BlazorHelpWebsite.com. And now, without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Michael to start this presentation.
Oh, thank you, Carter. All the code that I will be covering is available on this GitHub site. Carter will also post it in the chat. And it's also a link to a free ebook. There's one version for server-side Blazor and another version for client-side Blazor. And it covers every single thing that will be covered in this presentation. Okay, so let's jump into it. First, what is Blazor? Blazor is basically a Microsoft technology that creates single-page applications, much like Angular, React, and Vue. Now, Blazor comes in two different modes, server-side Blazor and client-side Blazor, which is also known as Blazor WebAssembly. Now, the difference between the two is that with server-side Blazor, all the code is executed on the server. And it communicates with the web browser using a technology called SignalR. With client-side or WebAssembly Blazor, all the Blazor code runs inside the web browser, and it communicates with the server using HTTP web-based technologies, just like React, Angular, and Vue. Today, what we're going to cover is we're going to create an application called what I call the Syncfusion Help Desk application. What this does is it allows a user to come and create help desk tickets. And when they save the ticket, it'll be saved to the database. A little toast control will come up and indicate that it's saved. And the user will receive an email with a link that takes them directly to the ticket so that they can add additional comments that will then be emailed to the help desk administrator, who can then respond and it'll email back to the user. When the user comes back to a ticket, the top part of the ticket will actually be disabled because only the administrator can alter those parts, but the bottom parts, the comments, will be editable by the person who created the help desk ticket. There will be an administration section that only the administrator can see, and when they access that section, they're going to see the Syncfusion grid control, which allows them to edit the tickets, sort the tickets, resize the grid, actually reorder those grid columns, and it implements paging. So this really is the highlight of this presentation, and I will show you 100% of the code required to implement this incredible feature. The help desk administrator can also, of course, edit the tickets, and of course, no application is complete without showing you how to actually delete records, and there you go. Okay, so it's going to cover all the code needed to create the server-side version, and then at the end of the presentation, in the last 10 minutes, we'll cover the code required to the differences between the server-side version and the client-side version, but the end result is going to be the same for both of them. So this is a database-driven application, so I would recommend that you download the free SQL Server 2019 Developer Edition, and of course also use Visual Studio. You can use the community version. That's what I'm using for this presentation, and you just say File, New, Blazor App. When the dialog comes up, you'll click Change under Authentication, and you'll select individual user accounts and to store the user accounts in app, and your Visual Studio project will be created. So this is just a default project, no custom code yet. So you'll go to View SQL Server Object Explorer to create a new database, and you'll say Add New Database, and you'll create a database called Syncfusion Help Desk. And then you'll right-click on it and select Properties, and in the Properties, you can copy the connection string. You'll return to Visual Studio, and it's a JSON file, and when you open it up, there will be a default connection property, and you'll paste that connection string in there. So that's how the code will know how to connect to the database. However, the database is currently empty at this point, so the tables are created. In the startup.cs file, you'll take out the code that you see here and replace it with the code at the bottom. This enables roles. And the reason why we're enabling roles is we want to have some code that only, and some features that only the administrator will see. So we need to enable role support. So now if we hit F5 to run the application, this screen will come up. However, the database is still not set up. So if you click the register button, the migrations page will come up, and we'll click apply migrations, and the tables needed to support the security and roles will automatically be created. And then it'll say that you're logged in. So again, we really haven't done any custom code yet. We just pretty much just set up the application. By convention, the first page of your application is the index.razor page in the pages folder. So we're going to go ahead and open that up, and we're going to put this code here. So if you can bear with me, I'm going to try to highlight some of this code here. So with Blazor, you actually put, you have your using statements, injecting services at the top of the page, and in the center of the page is your markup. This is what's the users, and at there you have your what we call the code behind. And this can be put into a separate file. However, for this presentation, we're just going to keep it all in the same file. But that's indicated by this code tag here. So what we're showing you here is that we're injecting the user manager support and role manager support. And we're going to have this if statement that basically says, if the person's in the administrator role, then show this message, you are an administrator. The first method to run in the Blazor page is the onInitialize async method. This will be the first thing that runs. And I basically put some code here that basically says, look for an administration role. If that role is not there, create that administration role. Now try to find a user named administrator at email. If that person has not been created, go ahead and create them and also put them in that administrator role. And then finally, just determine who the current user is and set it as current user. And that way we can display that person's name at the top here. And the reason why we're doing all that is so that, sorry, let me go ahead and erase all drawings, there we go. So that when we actually run the application and log in as that user, it'll display a message that you are the administrator. So this code was put in there just so it shows you how you can manipulate roles and see who's in a role and that sort of thing. One more quick thing to note, when you click on the link, you're going to see this little error message, and that's because Microsoft has a bug in .NET Core 3.1. They did fix it in .NET Core 5.0. However, 5.0 just came out, so I didn't have enough time to update this presentation. So what I recommend that you do is follow along with the ebook using .NET Core 3.1, and then as soon as your application is done, switch it to 5.0, and then that little error message will stop showing up. They do plan to backport it back to 3.1, but that has not been done at the time of this webinar. Okay, so let's explore the project that would have been created. So with Blazor server side, everything's pretty much, it's just all in one project. When we do the WebAssembly, you're going to see there's actually going to be multiple projects. But here, all the code is all in one project, and all this code runs server side. The way it starts up is in the program.cs file. You'll see that web builder use startup. That indicates that the startup.cs file will be the first file that's, well, actually the next file that's loaded up. If we go into that file, there's a bunch of things in that file which we're going to cover in following parts of this presentation. But the point I want to call your attention to is at the bottom there where it says map fallback to page host. This indicates that the host page will be the first web page to be loaded. And when this page is loaded, you'll see in the component tag type of app. What that's indicating is that the app.razor file is the first Razor file to be loaded. And in the app.razor file, this sets up the authentication, which is using the cascading authentication state tags, and also the routing, meaning when a person clicks on a link, Blazor has to figure out where is the person trying to go and which page should I load. Around that page that is loaded, you'll see default layout is type of main layout. So now if we look at the main layout page, we see that it's a layout page because it inherits from layout component base, but it is basically a template. So you see nav menu. That's the nav menu.razor control. That is the razor control that you'll see on the left-hand side. There's a login display, which is login.razor control, which you see toward the top. And then you see a body tag. And let me go ahead and let me try to highlight that. There's this body tag. This is where the content of the page that the person is trying to go to, this is where it will be displayed. But you can see how with the layout page, you can put like your company logo, you can put a footer in there. So this is kind of the structure of your application here. So, all right, let's cover what it takes to add Syncfusion support to your application. It's really simple. We just right-click on the project node in Visual Studio and we select Manage NuGet Packages. We then search for syncfusion.blazor and we click the install button. It's that simple. For each Syncfusion control, you'll want to add its using statements. But so that you don't have to add those using statements to every page, you can open up the imports.razor file and you can just add the using statements there and it covers the entire application. So here are the using statements for the Syncfusion controls that are inside this sample application. However, there are tons of Syncfusion controls. So therefore, as you use more of the Syncfusion controls, you would have to add their using statements. But the documentation is very clear on what to do. The next thing we do is go into the startup CS file. We add a using statement for syncfusion.blazor, and then we add a line services.add Syncfusion Blazor. At this point, that adds the server-side support for Syncfusion. Syncfusion controls have CSS style sheets, so we have to open up the host CS HTML page, and we have to add the CSS style sheet link. And your support is totally there. Now, with every time I run, I'll be showing you some demos, you're going to see this box pop up saying that, hey, you're running a trial version. So I left it that way because the sample code, I don't have a license. But to get a license, you just click on that link. It takes you to Syncfusion, and you can get a free trial license so that this error message goes away. There's also information on how to purchase a license. However, if you are an independent developer or a small company, they have many versions which are totally free. So definitely click that link and see how to get your license. All right, let's get into creating the application. So the first thing we need to do is create a data layer. And the next thing we need to do is create the tables for our application. So right now, if you were to look into the application, the database, you would see these tables that begin with, ASP. Those are the tables that are automatically created when we click that migrations button to add the tables needed for security. But we don't have the tables for our application. So if we select the database, new query, and we run this script, again, this script is inside the documentation and also on the GitHub, and then we hit run, it'll create the two tables that we need for our application, which is help desk ticket details and help desk tickets. Here's a screen that kind of shows you the schema. So for each help desk ticket, there are one or more help desk ticket details. Now we need to write code that allows our code to talk to the database. And to create that code, which is called a data context, I recommend using a tool called EF Core Power Tools. It's a free tool. You go to the Visual Studio Marketplace, you download it and install it. Once you install it, in Visual Studio, if you right-click on the project node, you'll see a menu item, EF Core Power Tools. You select that and you select Reverse Engineer. You'll connect to your database and you'll see the help desk ticket details tables that we created. You go ahead and select them, click OK, put in the red box there. These are the options I use that will work with the sample code, but you can set it to be whatever you want. You just click OK, and boom, your data context is created. So it creates three files. The bottom file is the data context file, which we're going to write code that talks to, and then it creates these other two files, one for each table, and that's actually used to actually move data and reference it inside the data context. One more thing we do is we open up the startup.cs file and we add the following code there so that the data context can read that connection string that we put into the app settings file so that it can connect to the database. All right, we're now going to create a file that I'm going to call the Syncfusion Help Desk Service. So these are methods that will be reused by multiple pages in the application to connect to the database, so that we don't have to keep writing the same code over and over again. We're going to write it in one file, inject it into the application as a service, and that way we have code reuse. So we basically create a file called SyncfusionHelpDeskService.cs. So you'll see the public class Syncfusion Help Desk Service. And let me go ahead and do the spotlight there. So that's this right here. We're then going to use dependency injection to inject that data context that the EF core created for us. So that's what we do here in this line. So the Syncfusion Help Desk context, that's the data context that was created for us, and it uses dynamic injection to inject it into this class, and now it's available. The first method that we're going to implement is this method called getHelpDeskTickets. And I want to just take some time to call out how powerful this is. So what this method does is it returns an iQueryable, and it basically connects to help desk tickets. It also has this, I could have put return dot as queryable, but I also put in this case, as no tracking, because it turns off change tracking, because when we're querying the tickets, we don't need Entity Framework Core change tracking. But this line is all that's needed to access the help desk tickets for the Syncfusion controls. I'm going to show you in following code how the Syncfusion grid is able to connect directly to this method, and it will allow you to sort, you can even search the entire help desk tickets table. So this is very powerful, and it's just done by just this code here. And go ahead, turn that off, and we're going to implement some more methods. This right here will get a single help desk ticket. This method will create a new help desk ticket. To update help desk tickets, this method simply retrieves the existing help desk ticket, sets all the properties, and then it continues here, where if there's help desk ticket details, it'll loop through each help desk ticket detail, it'll update those properties, and then finally, this context save changes just causes the changes to be saved. So the code is, pretty straightforward and simple. And of course, no presentation is complete without the ability to delete a help desk ticket. So that's this method here. So all of this is inside that help desk ticket service. So now we want to make it available to the rest of the code. So we open up the startup.cs file and we add the following line to inject this as a service into the application. All right, so now we're going to create new tickets. So if you remember that screen, if there's a screen that pops up, it allows a person to put in help desk ticket details, but there's also validation, and when they click the save button, it'll save to the database. Okay, how is that done? Well, the first thing is we need to inject that help desk ticket service. So here, I could just use the inject statement, or in this case, I wanted to demonstrate how you can use the owning component base injection method. And what that allows us to do is that when a person leaves the page, it automatically removes the service from the resources in the application. But you could just use an inject statement, and I'll show you how I do that with the other services. So on that page, when a person clicks the button to save the help desk ticket, this little toast control pops up. So here it shows you how we're now starting to use the Syncfusion controls. So the SF toast control, this is, I just used that markup. The content is toast content, which is a variable, and that way I'll be able to set the message. And at the bottom there, it shows you the server-side code, the code that's in the code section that just gives me a reference to that Syncfusion toast control, so I can manipulate it and show it and hide it. For the validation, we simply use the help desk ticket object, and we put code like this. And I'll just go ahead and highlight that real quick. We simply say, like, ticket status is required, ticket date is required, ticket description is required, and the length must be between a minimum of 2 and as high as 50. And if this doesn't pass, then my custom message will show. Ticket request or email, it's required, but I can also just say it's an email address. So this is how you put validation support. You just put it into a class, and then in the next code here, also in the next code I'm going to show you, we'll be implementing the Syncfusion text box, the date picker, and the drop-down list. And here's the code. So I apologize that it may be a little small for you, but again, like I said, you can see all the code in the GitHub, but I just want to call out a couple of things. First off, the model, while it says OBJ help desk ticket, the type of this is the help desk ticket that I showed on the slides before. So that's how the wiring up for the validation is done. I put it in an edit form, and I put the data annotation validator, and that says that what's put into this form will be validated according to the model. The Syncfusion drop-down list is just simply here, and it's bound to ticket status. The date picker control is bound to the ticket date. The text box control is bound to ticket description, and the other text box control is bound to requester email. If there's a validation error, the validation message will display here, or here, or here. The drop-down, there's actually not a validation on that one because you're restricted to what you select. There's a save button, which is of type submit, which means that on submission, it'll call this method handle valid submit. This method will not be called if there's any validation errors. So only when all the validation errors are cleared will it actually call this method, which will actually then save to the database. So in the code, we have some global properties to create a default help desk ticket using today's date. And when they click the button to submit the ticket, it calls this method, which basically sets the properties and saves to the database. And at the bottom here, it says, show the toast that says saved. So the way it looks for the user, when they come to the page, they see the help desk ticket. They can do the drop-down using the Syncfusion drop-down control. When they select the date control, the Syncfusion displays a nice little date picker. If they don't put the proper input, the validation errors will show. And finally, when they're done, they click save, and the little toast control comes up and says save. Okay, so let's go ahead and just take a quick look at that running. So this is the application actually running. Let me hit refresh. And this is that message I told you put there. Okay, so basically, this is the drop down. I can say, well, this is an urgent ticket. This is the nice Syncfusion date picker control. If I don't type in the right thing, obviously the validation will come. And if I do the thing, so what I did is I set a breakpoint here so that you can kind of see that this handle valid submit is being called. This is the information that's being passed in, and basically I can just let this method continue, and the little toast control shows up there. And from current slide, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about the help desk administration. So this is the part that only the administrator can see. So to create that, we would say, right click on the pages folder, we say add new item. We say Razor component, we're gonna call it administration.razor. And we'll start the page this way. The thing I wanna call out to you is to show you how security works is Blazor has a tag called authorized view, and you can specify a role. So what this is saying is that inside here, this content will only show if a person is an administrator. So it just kind of shows you how you can, have your security in your application. However, on the left-hand side, we don't want to show the administrator link unless the person is an administrator. So the way that's implemented is the current link code, on the left-hand side, I say take that out, and you have a link called administration, and you wrap it in a authorized view roles administrator tag like I showed you before. And that way, this link, the administration link on the left-hand side, will only show if a person is an administrator. So kind of want to demonstrate how that's done. So if it's here, if I'm an administrator, I see that link. If I'm not an administrator, I don't see that link. And even if I try to go directly to the page, the other code would protect that page and not show the content of the administration unless the person was an administrator. Okay. Now, again, the highlight of this presentation really is that Syncfusion grid control. And I apologize again that it's a little small here, but the server-side part I already showed to you. That was that iQueryable method that was in our Syncfusion service. This is the markup for the page. I simply say I want a Syncfusion grid. The data source is pointing to that iQueryable. I then can just set properties. I want paging, I want sorting, I want resizing, I want reordering. I just set those properties. I want the paging to be the size to be 5. I just set that property. Then for the columns down here, the ticket ID, the ticket status, the ticket date, the ticket description, the email, I just simply make these columns. I also wanted an edit and delete button, so I just use this markup to say that I have an edit and delete button. And what happens is that the code here for grid events simply says that if any button is clicked, call this method, which is on command clicked. So then I'm going to show you later in how inside this method I determine is the person trying to edit or delete. But this is the entire markup that's needed to make that grid functionality work. So here it's just showing you how on initialize, I simply connect COL help desk tickets to that get help desk tickets iQueryable method that you saw we created earlier. And then if we were to run the application at that point, this is the result that you would get: a sortable, pageable grid. And so again, like I said, you can reorder the columns, the paging works, and there you are. So that alone is one of the reasons for using Syncfusion controls to create your application, because otherwise it would be a massive amount of code that you would need. So now, if a person does click on the edit or delete buttons, notice that it pops up in a dialog. And so Syncfusion has a SF dialog control. And the dialog control has a template where you can set the header, and you can also set content. So if a person is trying to delete a record, the dialog will pop up and it'll say, do you want to confirm delete yes or delete no? If they say yes, it calls a method confirm delete yes. If not, it calls a method called confirm delete no. And again, we have some properties. And then, like I said, there's this on command click method. So in this case, if it is a delete, this line says, did they click the delete button? If so, show that pop-up. And inside that pop-up, if they say no, it just simply makes the pop-up go away. But if they say yes, I need to delete the record and refresh the grid. So we're using the Blazor ref object to get a reference to the Syncfusion grid. And this is the property. So this is added to the markup of the grid. This is added to the code section. And then this confirm delete yes will delete the record. And at the bottom, because I have a reference to the grid, I'm able to say grid object dot refresh. So that's how I'm able to delete a record and then refresh the grid so that that record is no longer in the grid. So this is the experience. You click delete, the says delete button comes up, says delete yes or no. If you do click yes, it then deletes it. Now let's look at editing a ticket. Now what happens is that I do have quite a bit of code already on the page, and I'm about to add a bunch of a code to show the edit box. So with Blazor, what you can do is I can create a new page called edit-ticket.razor. That's what you see in the bottom right-hand corner. But then I can basically insert that page into the main administration page by just simply having a tag that says edit ticket. So basically the name of that control without the .razor part. And that page will then show right there in this section of the code. However, I also need to tell that code which ticket we're working on, so I can also pass parameters. And so what I'm showing you here is that when you click on the edit button, I'm going to show in an you see the EJS dialog. That's the Syncfusion dialog control. So inside that dialog control, it's basically going to say, hey, you're editing this ticket. And then inside the content here, I'm going to have all the code that will display the ticket and also allow you to add ticket details. And then inside the footer of this dialog, there'll be the save button. So this right here is that control that shows the edit ticket. And again, I'm using the same Syncfusion controls that you saw before, the drop-down list, the date picker, the text box. However, at the bottom, we allow you to add, ticket details. So that's how this code here works. And what happens is it basically says, do you have any details? If you do, make a table, and this is the header. And then for each ticket detail, it just basically shows you the ticket details. And then using the Syncfusion text box, you can add new details. And then there's a button to basically allow you to, add additional details. Now, all that content that I just showed you is actually contained here. So this edit ticket says all that code, just slam it inside the content here. When the person's finished editing the ticket, they're going to show a save button. And when they click that save button, call save ticket. And when they save the ticket, I just simply call that update ticket method that you saw we created earlier, and it will update the ticket. And you saw that there was code that will update all the details, and then just says now close that dialog box. And then of course at the bottom there it says then refresh the grid. So that's pretty much how it works. And then that way, if a person clicks the edit button, the box pops up, they can add details, and when they're done, they click save, and when they hit save, it works. So let's take a quick look at that. So here I'm going to log in as an administrator. And because I logged in as the administrator, I see the administration link. When I click the administration link, this is the Syncfusion control. As you see, the paging works, sorting works, the delete button works. I can say yes, I can say no. If I say no, I can say yes. Notice how the grid refreshed. I can then edit tickets. I can put new info, spell it right, click add, and then I click save, and it's saved. So basically, I actually did cover 100% of the code needed to actually create the functionality that you actually see right here. And current slide. Okay, I'll just have a couple of quick slides to cover how the emails are sent. So this is actually not a Syncfusion thing, but I wanted to make an application that truly worked. So therefore, I knew I needed to send emails. So the flow of the emails is that when a user creates a help desk ticket, an email will automatically be sent to the administrator. When the administrator updates the ticket, an email will automatically be sent to the user. So that's kind of the flow, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. So to implement this, if you go to SendGrid, you can get a free license key. I think it allows you to do like 30,000 emails or a month or something. So you can go there, you get a free key, and in the sample code, there's a property in the app settings where you can put in that key and your sender email, and that kind of sets that part up. To implement SendGrid, you just install their NuGet package, And then we're going to create a file called emailsender.cs, and this is going to be a service file that we're going to be injecting into the application. So we use dependency injection here to inject configuration that allows us to read the configuration settings that we just did, and also HTTP context assessor because we need to construct this link so that the person can go back directly to their ticket. So this is just some boilerplate code that basically, sends an email. However, so it continues here. But the part I want to call your attention to is we construct a path where we basically say where the application is running / email ticket ID. That's a page that we're going to create, or email ticket edit, and / ticket GUID. So every ticket that's created, you'll see that there was this sample GUID that was being created. And so what this does is it basically, constructs a path, to that ticket. So we'll use, in the startup file, we'll inject the service like we did before. And then inside the page that needs it, we'll inject, our email sender service. And then to send an email, we just simply call email sender, send email. We set the email subject. If we need to have it go to anyone besides the administrator, we will put their email address there, and then we will pass the ticket GUID. So what happens is that when the person clicks on the link, we need to capture that GUID. So with Blazor, you can actually add multiple routing to a page. And so to our email ticket register control, we're basically going to add this markup here. And what this says is when someone comes to this page and they're going to a page that begins with email ticket ID, whatever is after the / is the GUID. Grab that value and store it in this ticket GUID variable, which will allow us to pull up that ticket. So this right here shows you the link that the person gets. And what happens is that this first part is just getting to the website. Email ticket edit, that's the part that will match that path. And therefore, everything after that will be grabbed as the GUID. And then we have code that will then pull up that ticket. Okay, so for the remainder of the presentation here, I'm going to cover what is different between the client side WebAssembly version of the application versus the server side. So if you want to make a client side or WebAssembly version of the application, instead of selecting Blazor Server App, you would have selected Blazor WebAssembly App. You will still have gone into authentication to set the authentication like we did for the Blazor server part. But then also notice at the bottom there, you would check the box that says ASP.NET Core Hosted. So instead of one single project, you'll see we have 3 projects. So let me just kind of highlight this here. This part here at the top, the Syncfusion Help Desk client, this is the Blazor code. So all the Blazor code is contained here. This server project down here is all your server-side code. This is normal .NET code. And then we have the shared project, and this allows you to put in classes or actually even assets that are shared between the 2 projects. So you only have to, some things you only have to put them once. If you are, for example, using a different sort of server technology, you could create a Blazor app that only had the client project here, and then you would have anything you wanted on the server. So that's what allows you to use Blazor with various technologies. The Syncfusion code part, that part is pretty much, 99% exactly the same, whether it's Blazor server or client. And I'll cover those differences now. Here we go. Okay. Most of these changes that I'm going to show you are really server-side changes. And the reason why is that with Blazor server, everything is running on the server, so you can skip a lot of steps. Whereas with the client part, you have to be very explicit in order for the security to be correct and that sort of thing. So one of the first things is that we need to enable role management. So with Blazor Server, the role management is pretty straightforward, but with the client, we take out this code here, but notice that the code that we will implement here to enable role management looks very different. And the reason why is with Blazor Client or Blazor WebAssembly, it's using a technology that's based on identity server. So therefore you have claims and it's just more complex. So this is the code that's used, and this is what's different. Also, the whole flow of, I have that code where I have an administrator log in and it says you are an administrator. I couldn't use the flow that I use on the server, on the Blazor server version. So this one, I basically create a custom register page. And in that register page, this is the markup that basically, just shows the markup. And this code here looks like that code that I had in Blazor server, where it says, create a role if it doesn't exist, and if so, add the person and that sort of thing. So it kind of does it, but it's a little bit different. And then I had to make sure. Oh, actually, that one's there. So then on the index page, the Blazor part of the code, that part looks the same. The authorized view, roles, administration roles, that part's the same. So then when you run the application, you click register, you log in, it'll say you are an administrator. Something else, and what I'll do is this is going to go for another 5 minutes here, and then we'll be able to take questions. The Blazor code, because it's all running in the web browser, when it has to communicate with the server, it has to make web calls. However, if you turn on authentication, all the calls must be authenticated. Well, we don't want that because in some cases, we want a person, for example, to create a help desk ticket, but they're not logged in. So what you have to do is you have to create what we call an additional anonymous web client. So on the methods, we would have to say, okay, for certain methods, allow anonymous. That's what this is kind of showing you here. And in the program.cs in the client project, we create a new HTTP client and we give it the name no authentication client. So now we can go into a page and we can inject the client factory, and we can then say, hey, use this no authentication client, and then we can make the calls. If we don't use this no authentication client, then it's automatically going, when it makes the calls, it's automatically going to be calling methods that are protected. So here it kind of shows how, okay, now without the person being logged in, they can see this content. The data layer is also a little bit different. All the parts that I covered using the EF Core Power Tools, you would do all that exactly the same. However, when you get to the part where you're creating that service, instead you would make a controller that would inherit from controller base. The code that goes in it is similar. The only difference is that iQueryable thing method that we had before, that won't work with Blazor WebAssembly. So what happens is that Syncfusion actually has articles on how to create a method that will work with their Syncfusion data grid control. And in my implementation, I'm showing how it's done, but basically I'm connecting to my help desk tickets, but I have to first return a count. I then have to have methods to indicate how the paging is going to work. And then, I actually get the help desk tickets if they're descending order. Otherwise, it's ascending order, and I return the help desk tickets there. So basically, you would get this boilerplate code, replace it with your database, and now it'll support the Syncfusion grid running in Blazor WebAssembly will now be supported. And again, you have to make sure that if it needs to be anonymous access, then set that or otherwise. So here for creating new help desk tickets, that you can do anonymous, so that's set anonymous. If you're updating it, that also allows anonymous, and that's because you have to have a GUID in order to first get the ticket, which is something you can't guess. This part of the update is exactly the same as it was. Here for deleting, I put no, you have to be an administrator to call the method to delete. One more thing, you'll have to put this code in here because otherwise the data context that they create for security will conflict with the one that you have to create for your custom help desk tickets. So, because I ran into this bug, and so that's again covered. But then at that point, it's pretty much ready to go, and the Blazor code, which we'll cover next, is pretty much the same. So again, when they click on the button to create a new ticket, this method pretty much looks like the one for the server-side version. The only difference is that here is where we just basically connected directly to the database. In this case, we're going to be calling our Syncfusion Help Desk post method that we wrote in our controller. Otherwise, the application display is exactly the same. So they can create a new help desk ticket. The drop downs work the same. The calendar works the same. Even the validation works the same. So everything I showed you for the validation, it will be exactly the same. And of course, the saving will then save, and the toast will then come up. And then if you look in the database, yep, you'll see that it's totally there. And then finally, on the help desk administration, this is that Syncfusion grid control. What's really nice about that is that the markup is pretty close to the same. Let me just quickly show you what the differences are. So the differences are highlighted there. So actually, the first one, the data source, the markup is the same. It's just that I'm going to show you in the next slide that COL help desk tickets, I'm going to show you how it is bound to a web call rather than directly to an iQueryable. The key thing though is Syncfusion has this thing called the Syncfusion or SF data manager. So what happens is, and it has this thing called a data adapter. So what this is basically saying is, it's saying, okay, did you make a controller, with a get method that is in a controller that's at Syncfusion Help Desk? And if you did, then that highlighted part will allow the rest of the grid control, which is exactly the same as it was in the server-side version, to work. So it's really amazing because what that's doing is it's doing a lot of work, but it just works. So again, in the code behind here it is marked as iQueryable, okay? But the key thing is that data manager is what allows what really is not an iQueryable to be interpreted as an iQueryable so that the code just works. And when you run it, that grid will work exactly the same. So, yeah, this is the grid is really one of the things where I was extremely pleased and surprised with the incredible functionality that that's available without a lot of code. And of course, they have the grid control does so much more that I can't even cover it. There's plenty of articles on the Syncfusion Help site, and they of course provide full support. So again, like I said, the sorting and the paging works. Okay, so Carter, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks, Michael, for the excellent presentation. And thank you all for joining today as well. If you find that you have any questions, you can contact us at sales@syncfusion.com, or you can add your questions in the comment section found below. You can also find the GitHub links for these projects in the video's description. Thanks for joining today, and we hope to see you next time.